Good evening, everybody. Gary here with RoXolid Productions, and what we are hoping to be a very cool sort of addition here to the channel. We are calling it What's Your Wednesday? And basically, oops, sorry, as I bumped the microphone here a little bit and makes the camera go all cray-cray. Basically, this came out of a conversation at the Portland Retro Gaming Expo last year between myself, Aaron from the Pixel Game Squad, and Gabbo from the Pixel Game Squad. And we eventually just got to having a whole lot of conversations about what's your favorite this, what's your favorite that, so on and so forth, in a bunch of different categories, whether we were talking about Razor Comics. Just subscribe. Thank you very much. And I see Mike Anderson there. Welcome to the pre-show. We're going to get rolling proper in a few minutes. But the idea behind What's Your Wednesday is basically what is your favorite X, Y, or Z, and talking about a bunch of different categories. Now, if you want to participate in one of our shows, send me an email, rocksolidmail@gmail.com. Hit me up on Twitter @RoxSolidStudios, and we can try to make something happen. Now, if you are one of our Patreon supporters, you do get first dibs, and we do have a guest here on the line. Caller, will you introduce yourself, please?
This is Justin Caldwell. I'm glad to be here.
Well, Justin, thank you so much. And Justin is actually one of our newest Patreon supporters over at patreon.com/rocksolid. And if I haven't done so yet, Justin, thank you so much. It means a ton to myself and my family. Ginger Beard, the gaming dad Hartley. Hello from Oregon. Hello, my friend. So that is an awesome name, a bit of a mouthful, to be honest with you. So as we go through this week's topic is going to be, because we just had the Major League Baseball All-Star game last night, what are your gaming all-stars? And it could be a person, it could be a game, it could be a system, it could be an event. And Justin and I have not, John Early, there will be a separate video to talk about that in the future. But we are going to talk about who and what our gaming all-stars are. I have my notes here. Justin has his notes, and we have not compared notes, so there may be some overlap, there may not be. The approach that I took on here was basically looking at it like, again, since this was All-Star Week, as a baseball team lineup. So I have my starting 9 plus one reliever or my closer. So, Justin, would you like to start it off? I'll let you go ahead and kick this one off if you'd like.
Sure. Probably one of my favorite games of all time probably has to be the original Bionic Commando on the old Toaster NES.
What are some of the things now? I mean, it was a great platformer, and it really changed the dynamic of action platformers back around that time. One of the things that was unique about it was there's no jumping. You have to use your bionic arm to jump around. What were some of your favorite aspects of that game?
Well, probably just the. I mean, one of the things I liked was the graphic. I mean, for the time, I thought the graphics were good. The story, was kind of okay. It was a little, you know, what wasn't very much story, but for what was there, great gameplay. I mean, having the bionic arm as opposed to jumping around everywhere was, as you said, a kind of a game changer. The music was pretty good.
It was typical Capcom. It was excellent.
Yeah. I probably my the favorite music track in the game that I have is the bass towards the end of the game, where it's like the maze level. That's like my favorite music track from the game. And it had a decent bit of difficulty. It's like it wasn't too overly hard, but at the same time, it wasn't wasn't too easy. Um,
Definitely agree. And it's one of those where I think it was, you saw some, because it was one of the earlier games on the NES,
mhm.
you did see a lot of the, basically the foundation of what Capcom would wind up doing on the system through that. I look at games that came out even on the Super Nintendo, such as Area 88 or UN Squadron here in the U.S., that had that same type of map system, and really thought that it was. I agree with you. That is a really good first choice. Um, I'm going to go a little bit in a different direction here for my first pick, and I'm going to go with
Okay.
someone who, that if he didn't do what he did, this channel would not exist right now. In fact, I don't know that there would be many YouTube channels that would exist right now. I'm talking about the man who uses the F word as every single word in a sentence. The man who was at one time the angry Nintendo nerd, became the angry video game nerd, became Cinemassacre. I'm talking James Rolfe. And James had such a unique approach where it was interesting, because I think people initially thought he was the nerd and the nerd was him, and he very much blurred the lines of reality. He became a character early on, but I also think that he showed what it was to be a hardcore collector. You look at what he has in his games room, and it's a thing of beauty. Between he and Mike Matei and everyone over at Cinemassacre, I mean, they've made an angry video game nerd movie. Um, you know,
which is excellent, by the way.
if you like camp, it's very
Yeah,
campy, I would say.
yeah.
Um, it reminded me a lot of the video toaster software that I first started editing with back in high school in the mid '90s, with some of the effects. But the fact, dude made a movie and had it in theaters, and
Hmm.
it's really interesting. What are your thoughts on the angry video game nerd and James Rolfe?
Well, I mean, I totally agree that that probably the reason that we've seen such a resurgence of just popularity with retro games and whatnot probably has to do with James Rolfe and his angry video game nerd persona.
And I think too that you look at the different people, isn't quite the right term, but the effects that he's had throughout the industry, as far as not just who he's worked with in front of the camera, but behind the camera too. I mean, he still goes to video game conventions. You have ScrewAttack.com that he was a part of for a while. What basically started as one character and expanded out. He had Board James and all the other characters that truly made Cinemassacre a brand. So there you guys have our first picks. Let us know in the chat what you think. Justin, what's your next pick?
My next pick is the Guardian Legend also for the NES. Um, and the reason I think it's unique is it pretty much perfectly melds two types of gameplay. There's the action adventure, action RPG type aspect, but there's also mixed in the top-down space shooter uh, segments, which um, not a whole not very many games to my knowledge, at least on the NES, did uh, back in the day.
Well, and I agree with you. It has that almost that Xevious sort of gameplay with that top down, where it's not a Pegasus because that's the horse. What am I thinking of? Where he can fly, just like Pit from. Why am I drawing a
Oh,
blank here?
Kid
Kid
Icarus.
Icarus, where he's got the wings and everything, and it is
Hmm.
it's another one of those games where I think when you hear people talk Nintendo hard, it's one of those games where you never feel like you got cheated when you die, but you will die a lot.
And one thing that I think more games from that era should have done is the password system was, in my opinion, unique because even though it could be kind of long, built into the game there was actually a function to where you could actually uh, uh, check to see that you wrote the password down correctly, and it would actually tell you, like, if you didn't write it down correctly, it would actually tell you what it's supposed to be, which again, to my knowledge, not very many, if any, other NES games did that at the time.
Yeah, very good call there as well. Before we get to my next one, I want to kind of give you guys a heads up too that this episode of What's Your Wednesday is brought to you this week by Ryan Schlemmer and, of course, CastlemaniaGames.com. Make sure you check them out for both your modern and retro gaming needs over at CastlemaniaGames.com. I've got the link down below in the more info section if you want to check him out. Russ says that you are a little bit low on your end. I will see if I can bump that up. So we should be a little bit better, Russ. Thanks for the heads up on there. No, I had him turned down. He was pegging his levels a little bit in our pre-stream, so I appreciate that, Russ, very much. But go ahead, check out CastlemaniaGames.com for your new and retro gaming needs. My next all-star that I have to have here is a bit weird. It's arcades. A lot of us, especially those of us who grew up in the early to mid 80s, well, some of us never grew up, we just got older. We didn't necessarily have a home video game system initially, especially if you're thinking just after the video game crash of the early 80s, before the NES really became the power horse that it was. Arcades was where you went and played the latest games, and really it became a social endeavor. What people enjoy today with online gaming, we actually had to do that face to face back in the day. And I mean, we had the ability to play great games. Nintendo had the Play's Choice 10. The one arcade cabinet I have always wanted has been the Star Wars arcade cabinet. Arcades are just so fundamental, at least to my youth. And I mean, my parents always hated me going after them for, didn't I just give you a quarter? Yes, I just suck at games. But there were so many days, weeks, hours that I spent at Sammy's Burger Place in Menominee Falls, Wisconsin, going to Christmas Mountain just outside the Wisconsin Dells. That's where I played Final Fight for the first time, was on a stand-up arcade machine. It was something that I have always absolutely loved, playing games in arcades. And even here, semi-locally, about 2 hours away from me, I've got the Galloping Ghosts up in Chicago that I still want to get to. The Two Brothers Brewery outside of St. Louis, where we had our post-Mo GameCon event last year. Just got to say, I love arcades. What say you, Justin?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I remember I remember at the local Cactus Jacks, my friend Chris and I must have spent like $5 one time playing through and beating House of the Dead.
That's a
And
great co-op.
yeah,
Now,
definitely.
one thing, and I don't know if anyone else, and again, feel free in the chat weigh in on this as well. A lot of our arcades got shut down because, unfortunately, of gang activity. There were shootings and robberies and so on and so forth, and it just became a really bad area for people to go to, which is too bad because arcades were just they were a staple of my youth. Justin, what do you have coming up next for your third pick?
Uh, Star Tropics on the NES.
A very
Um,
popular game.
yeah, and one that I feel definitely deserves a new game in its because unfortunately I don't think it gets enough love nowadays.
Now, I have to admit, I am not an RPG situation or RPG fan. I do own a copy of Star Tropics that I've played about 4 minutes of. Just I couldn't get into it, but I know guys like the NES Addict, Russ Lyman, who's in the chat here. Those are two guys that absolutely love that game. And do you think that the game has aged as well as perhaps some other RPGs, simply from the standpoint that you really needed the manual to be able to unlock the phone number or whatever it was? You had that piece of paper you had to soak. Yes, you can look that up online, but if you don't know that you have to do that, you may lose a little something. Do you think that it's aged as well as perhaps some of the other in the genre?
Well, I mean, in that respect, I mean, like you said, if you don't have access to the original, piece of paper that you had to soak in water to get the code to progress uh, further in the game, and you know, it I mean, it's a good game, but I think it hasn't aged probably as well as some other games in the action RPG series genre.
I'm a little bit surprised too that we haven't seen something like that ported to. I mean, it screams that it could be a mobile game fairly easily. That they haven't done something along that lines and brought it to mobile. And the unique thing with Star Tropics is, unlike some of the games that Rare produced, I don't think there's any licensing issue with it whatsoever. Is there?
Well, I know when Nintendo re-released it on the Wii Shop channel, um, they had to change a few things in the game, like the starting island yo-yo. In the Wii Shop Channel re-release, they changed it to like Island Star, which I kind of well, apparently in Canada there was some kind of copyright thing with yo-yo or something.
I remember that.
So yeah, so that's why they had to change it. Which, I mean, I can kind of understand, having like the Island Star, the Shooting Star, the Supernova or whatever it is, the final weapon. But it's one of those things that, having it called the Island Yo-Yo, just, that's what I grew up knowing it as.
Yeah, and that's one of those. I think it's also pretty unique because it's one of the rare RPGs that is it's purely an American game. I mean, from references to Coca Cola, the baseball bat, and yes, baseball's big in Japan, but the fact that it does have so many American undertones, I think really lends to it being one of the most unique RPGs out there.
Yeah, it only came out in North America and Europe. Uh, Japan, as you said, didn't see it released. And interestingly enough, the sequel was only released here in North America.
Very similar to how it took forever and a day for us to get. Well, actually, we still I don't think have a real release of like Doki Doki Panic, and it wasn't until Retrobit came out with Holy Diver that we got those. So good call. My next one, I've got to go again. I'm going kind of. I feel like I'm quoting James Rolfe, my first, the first reference that I have here, but I'm going to take you back to the past, and I'm going to mention Pong. And I am that old that my family had a Pong machine, and I remember playing Pong, and it's one of those that really it was such a simple game, but it introduced the option to play video games on your home television. It was very simplistic, but it was also one of those things where just about anyone could pick up and play. And it definitely, by the time that I started playing around with it in 82, 83. I mean, it was old hat at that point in time. But Pong and Atari both really it helped bring video gaming into the living room and make it, it was the Wii before the Wii, if that makes sense.
I totally agree. I mean, even though I'm old enough to have played on a Atari 2600 and even a Commodore 64, it really wasn't until the NES that like my love of video games really got its start.
And it's one of those two where, I mean, I think there was really only two variants on that where you could either have a single goalie, as it were, or was it two? I thought there was a switch where you could go from one to two, essentially. But I mean, it was so simplistic, but I think in its simplicity, it made it more welcoming and endearing to others and easier for just about anyone. It was the Wii, like I mentioned, it's the Wii before the Wii. It was the Wii bowling before Wii bowling, where you had grandparents and parents, and it was really cross generational.
Yeah, the Wii Sports of the late '70s.
Absolutely. So, Pong, definitely one of my video gaming all stars. What's your next one that you've got?
This one's a movie, and has to be the Wizard from what is it, 1985, I think, something like that. But yeah, or no, it may have been later than that, I think. But yeah, it had to have been because the uh, Super Mario Bros. 3 reference. But yeah, I mean that's one of my just just one of my all-time favorite movies. I mean, it's very much a movie of my generation.
Well, I mean, you gotta love the Power Glove. It's so
Yeah,
bad. I mean, there's
so
so many.
bad.
If you are a video gamer, that movie is 20,000. You got 20,000 on Double Dragon.
Yeah,
Um,
50,000 on Double
or it was
Dragon.
50,000. Yeah.
Yeah.
Video game Armageddon, and it's kind of funny too that it actually spawned the Nintendo World Championships competition, and I don't know if you did you happen to be able to participate in the Nintendo World Championships.
No, I was born in '85, so
Okay,
even though I was a product of the '80s, I was pretty much a child of the '90s.
sure. So I actually did participate in the Nintendo World Championships at the Mecca Auditorium in downtown Milwaukee, Wisconsin,
Hmm.
and it was what you saw in the movie. And I don't even think I had seen The Wizard by the time I had played this. Um, it it was weird how it kind of foreshadowed what it was going to be. Um, and I mean, we've all seen and heard about the NWC carts and seen or played the ROMs. That's probably
Hmm.
one of the most emulated games out there because it's a fun challenge. I still have sitting right over there, and I've showed it on many a stream, my Nintendo World Championship semifinalist sticker that I won. It's still got the paper backing on it. I never peeled it off. I unfortunately was stupid and threw away the NWC 1990 like painter's style hat and everything. But yeah, the Wizard.
Ah.
I know. Well, it's like that my
Oh
Transformers, my
yeah,
Star Wars figures. I mean,
yeah.
and now I don't throw anything away.
Hindsight is 2020.
Right. So I mean, it was so much fun, and if I remember right, you basically got a punch card, and you could either play. It was either three times or five, and if you went through the loop and you went that many times and you didn't make it to the semifinals, you were done. You could come back and play, but you couldn't advance. And I got through barely on my very last try, and it was just. I remember my palms were sweating and I was nervous and I didn't think I was going to do it. And then I just started laying down Tetris after Tetris after Tetris. And with the multiplier, that got me out of the general population into the semifinals. So that was so much fun. The Wizard, um, Very cool. John, stick tight. We'll kind of actually before I go on here to my next one. So this is one of our new shows that we have, or new format here that we have on the channel. Again, it's called What's Your Wednesday, and where we're going to talk about what your favorite or most memorable or what have you item in a genre is. So this week's topic obviously is video game all-stars, and the way you can get involved in the topic is, first of all, our Patreon supporters over at patreon.com/RoXolid. They get first bite at the apple in a week. Otherwise, you can email me, roxsolidmail@gmail.com. If you've got a topic you'd like to discuss, feel free to submit it. And if it's the best submission for the week, we will do it live on the next Wednesday. Basically, the way that we have Justin here is one of our newest Patreon supporters, and he wanted to be on the show, so he's our initial guest that we have here. And basically, we're just streaming everything through Discord. So that's the other thing, is you just need to have a Discord account to be able to have us import the audio. So that's where we are at there. So my next one, and John Early brought this up, and I'm going to tag team this one, because my next all-star is the Game Boy and Tetris, because, I mean, you bought one, you got the other. There was rumors for years and desires. I remember being on car trips. Man, I wish I had my NES with me. This would be so much better if I had my NES with me. And finally, the Game Boy came out, and I essentially had the equivalent of my NES with me. And with that, of course, I had Tetris. And I remember we were just talking about the Nintendo World Championships. On my way from my house to the Mecca Auditorium, I was playing Tetris to practice on my Game Boy. The Game Boy has been just a fantastic machine. I'm looking at, I've got the black Live Out Loud version. I've got a custom orange one. I have 2 Game Boy Advance SPs, a Super Mario Kart Red DS, a white DS, and my new Nintendo 3DS. But they all started basically, even if you trace the lineage back to, for the Switch and the Switch Lite, it all goes back to being able to play portably on the Game Boy.
I totally agree. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to get my first Game Boy until sometime after the original Game Boy was a thing. But my first experience with a Game Boy system was actually the Game Boy Color.
Very good
And
system.
I had many fun memories with that system, which I still have around here somewhere.
Well, and the other thing that made the Game Boy so fun is the fact that you could later on play it through your Super Nintendo, through your GameCube. I mean, it was crazy to even think that you could play your handheld then on your television. That was so cool.
Yeah, especially with the custom borders and
Oh, those were awesome.
even some of the games having actual color to them instead of just the like four shades of whatever color.
Well, and here, Krillin in the chat makes a great point here. He still has his copy of Tetris on Game Boy from when he was a kid, when the game was out. I will never get rid of it, and I am no longer to play, or I'm of it. I am no longer to play games no more. And he's owned all the Game Boy models, still own them, but the Micro. So, I mean, yeah, the Game Boy collecting community is, for such a small device, it's pretty huge.
Mm-hmm.
So, John, there is your reference to Tetris, and I mean, Tetris. If you guys have not done so, check out Norm the Gaming Historian's video on the history of Tetris. It's about a 45-minute video. I love long format videos. I just am. But from how that all came about, the different scenarios with Tengen and Nintendo and everything going on, it's really interesting. I highly recommend, if you're a fan of Tetris, definitely check out Norm's video. Justin, what do you got next?
Majora's Mask, Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask on the N64. Um, I on my original N64, I must have put probably 60 or 70 hours into it, getting every single mask and every single collectible and whatnot that you could in the game. And it was actually the first Legend of Zelda game that I was able to 100%, surprisingly.
See, and I find that to be a very hot and cold game. Like I myself,
Hmm.
if you guys haven't checked out the little sneak peek that I did on the Super 64 adapter coming for the N64 from our good friends over at Eon Gaming, I get a lot of people ask, make sure that you show Zelda when you do the review. I'm not a fan of the Zelda 64 games. There's something about them that just never clicked with me. So sell me as a non-fan of the game why I need to change my mind.
Well, the day and night cycle, the like just like unlike in Ocarina of Time, the mask actually had more use than just being used for a trading mini game to get the giant the great sword. Um, I don't know. It's just I I mean of the two, I actually prefer Majora's Mask, which, like you said, Majora's Mask is kind of one of those games that you either hate or you don't. I I mean me personally, I really enjoyed playing it back in the day.
Now, would you classify yourself though as as someone who more appreciates traditional RPGs?
Um, yeah, I definitely like traditional RPGs over. Well, I mean, I I don't know if I'd really. Uh, I mean, I guess the Zelda games could be considered RPGs, but I kind of
Wash your
more.
mouth out with soap. They are not. At least, at least not Link to the Past.
Yeah, yeah, but yeah, I mean, I enjoy the Final Fantasy games, the Dragon Quest, the Saga games, Secret of Mana, well, the Mana series, and I mean, I kind of enjoy a whole plethora of genres. Really, the only genre of games that I kind of don't like usually are sports games. Not no never really have been too big into uh, the sports gaming genre.
Okay. Well, again, I'm gonna go ahead.
I was just gonna say, although there is on the NES the Cyber Stadium Base Wars.
I
Uh,
I hear like Riff at the Pixel Game Squad, much like you, not a big sports game fan, loves Base Wars.
yeah, because it actually makes it interesting in my opinion.
So, before my next one, again, I want to remind you guys that this week's broadcast of What's Your Wednesday is being brought to you by Castlemania Games. Make sure you check them out for all of your modern and retro gaming needs. Check the link out down below in the more info section if you want to go ahead and see what Ryan has new to the castle, including a really cool feature he has called Castle Cash, where basically it's a loyalty rewards program. The more you spend, the more you earn towards future purchases. And if you use promo code RoXolid10, a little bit different than normal, giving you guys a special code here during the live stream. So RoXolid10, RoXolid 10, you can save 10% on most items on the website. again, thinking a little bit outside the box, my line of work for the last 10, 15 years has been in, marketing and publishing and so on and so forth. So on the marketing side of things, there are things that I really like pick up and enjoy. And as I get older, I enjoy it more. Man, Sony had an amazing idea back in the day with their fake president, Kevin Butler, and all of the Crash Bandicoot ads when they were going to Nintendo of America and basically mocking Mario. Hey, plumber boy, what's going on? And had someone dressed up as Crash in front of Nintendo of America. The Kevin Butler, I mean, it reminds me in some ways of the current Sonic food ads where you have kind of the dumb ditzy guy on there. That's kind of what Kevin Butler was. But it was great fun. It was not taking yourself too seriously. And I think whoever came up with both of those campaigns, they did a great job. And it really, I mean, it was one of those things where Sony already had a technical advantage over the competition in a lot of ways. But those ads and that strategy just increased brand awareness. It made it where more people were interested in what Nintendo had, or in what Sony had going on than Nintendo. And especially at a time when Sega could not get out of its own way, the Kevin Butler and the Crash Bandicoot ads were just, they were awesome.
Yeah, I actually don't remember that too much, but I'll definitely have to look into that.
Yeah, it's I would say the unique thing about the Kevin Butler ads too is the fact that he was actually on stage several times at E3 for Sony, claiming to be the president of Sony America. But he was simply, he didn't work for Sony. He was just an actor. He got fired and I believe sued by Sony because of the fact that he had appeared in, it was either a Firestone or Bridgestone commercial or something like that, and there were references to Mario Kart Wii, and Sony flipped their gasket over it. And Fripp here has got it down here. Hey, plumber boy, mustache man, your worst nightmare has arrived. Yeah, it was great. Krillin brings up the Ratchet and Clank ads. I mean, even again, Sony with Insomniac Games too. The Up Your Arsenal, Quest for Booty, things like that. They were really on the cutting edge and taking it to the competition. So definitely one of my all-stars out there. What's on your list next?
Sega Sanshiro, the Sega Saturn mascot. That's that's it is too bad that we didn't get that over here. The Sega Sanshiro commercials. I mean, that's the thing about Sega is I mean the Master System was great. The Sega Genesis was good, but then it's like once they started having all the things like the 32X and the Sega CD, and it's like they couldn't stick with one one thing long enough to you know because basically after so long the third parties and the investors in that just lost interest, and I think that's pretty much what did Sega in the end.
Well, I think they lost a lot of consumer confidence, especially around the midlife cycle of the Genesis going into the Saturn. Just even so much as you had the announcement of the Neptune that never materialized. I mean,
Hmm.
I'm looking at my Tower of Power right across from me right now, and it just I feel bad for it, like it's crying out for help. Um,
Yeah, the 32X looks like a bulbous tumor growing off the Sega Genesis.
Right. And especially if you have the Model 2 Sega CD, with the Model 1 Genesis, it's like one of these things is not like the others. But the Model 1 Sega CD was so unreliable, even today, that it's really a struggle. But yeah, I agree with you. It's for me, I see a parallel for Nintendo and not bringing the Famicom Disk System over, and we never got Discoon.
Yeah.
So very cool there. Yep. The funny thing too is I think I enjoy my Saturn more than the Dreamcast. I know that's weird.
And why is that? If you don't mind me asking.
Part of it is the stock controller. I do not like the Dreamcast controller at all.
Yeah.
And I thought even the Dream controller was better than the stock Dreamcast controller. I have we'll have some news on Dreamcast controllers coming up soon. Nothing I can talk about at this time, but and I think just some of the games were just better. The load times for my Dreamcast, it just drives me nuts. The thing is annoyingly loud, and I don't think that there was anything. There was no system mover for me on the Dreamcast that I couldn't play on the GameCube or the PlayStation 1, 2 that I enjoyed better on the Dreamcast than those other systems. Bleemcast would have been phenomenal today to be able to still go ahead and utilize in there to, like, I would love to play the Bleemcast version of Gran Turismo. I've heard it runs great. But yeah, for me, once they got past the Genesis, like I owned a Genesis back in the day because I wanted to play Sonic. There was no system mover like that for me for the later systems.
Yeah, Skies of Arcadia Legends is probably one of the best examples of a Dreamcast game being ported over to the GameCube.
Well, and
It's like the only thing that you kind of missed out on were the VMU stuff,
but don't you feel like that was kind of trying to dovetail on the backside of the Tamagotchi rage that was going on at the time? It just to me, I look at it as a gimmick.
Yeah.
But
I mean, other and one thing that I definitely do like about Skies of Arcadia Legends is it's one of the only RPGs I know of that, like, whether you're winning or losing, like the tempo and that of the music actually changes accordingly, and it's just like when you're losing with the tempo of the music and that, it makes you want to try and make it through. And then it's like when you're winning, like it just it's like, yeah, I'm winning. It's like just it's like it's a unique thing that I haven't seen in any other RPGs that I know of.
okay. My next entry, I've talked about this company a little bit here and there, but I got to give a tip of the hat to Atari and Nolan Bushnell. Yes, they absolutely destroyed the U.S. video game market in 1983. I don't think it was E.T. that did it, but it definitely contributed to it. The fact that there was little quality control for some time, that there was shovelware, there was Porky's Revenge. I mean, there were bad things about Atari. But man, Atari was so groundbreaking back in the day. There were so many different ways that just the Atari 2600 brought video gaming. At that time we thought, home quality or arcade quality video games home. And I mean, it really wasn't, but it was the closest thing that you could get. I absolutely loved one of my favorite games of all time still is Empire Strikes Back for the Atari 2600. And Atari also started the idea of backwards compatibility. You could play 2600 games on the 52 and 7800. The controllers would work back and forth as well. And Nolan Bushnell really helped make Atari what it was back in the day. Now, as we know, they did not have the best overall legacy. There were things that they did very wrong. I'm looking at you, Atari Jaguar. I've done the math. 32 bits is not 64. And the fact that your Jaguar CD, when attached to the console, makes it look even more like a toilet bowl. I'm also not throwing you, ladies and gentlemen, the Pixel Game Squad is here. We saw some of the first ports. John mentions that Atari could have worked with Nintendo. They chose not to. That's a good point. That Atari had been approached by Nintendo to bring the Famicom to the U.S., and they said no. But you got Nintendo games in the U.S. on the Atari 2600 before anywhere else. Mario Brothers, Donkey Kong, they were available, Popeye, on the Atari 2600. Even the arcade games. Like I say, one Atari game or one arcade game I absolutely wish I could have, and thanks to Arcade 1-Up, I may later this year, is the Star Wars arcade cabinet by Atari. They did not keep with the times. They thought their name was worth more than their innovation, but in the end, they still have a lasting legacy in this arena for a very good reason.
Yeah, they definitely were the ones to kind of pioneer the home console market and just bring arcade games, as you said, into the home.
And I mean, I think one of the interesting things too is the fact that you could play so many arcade games at home, and yeah, they weren't one. I mean, Pac-Man on the Atari 2600 is an abomination, but it's still a version of Pac-Man, and at the time, it was the best you could do, and it didn't cost you a ton of money to do so back in the day to get the cartridge in the system and everything. Plus, they had, I remember playing a game called Night Driver, where you use the paddles and everything, pole position. I mean, there were so many great games that Atari had because they essentially owned the market in the arcade, and they were able to leverage that and bring that home. Krillin here says he so agrees about the Jaguar and Jaguar CD. Best Jaguar game is Tempest 2000. Completely agree, and it's not even because of the game, it's because of the soundtrack. If you've never listened to the Tempest 2000 soundtrack, it is phenomenal. Almost as phenomenal as AJ Styles. Wrestling reference for you, folks. What do you got next on your all-star list?
Probably the game Nintendo GameCube for being the first Nintendo console to use disc format. There's so many good games like the Metroid Prime series, um, Soul Calibur, Soul Calibur 2 was good. Just and being able to, as you mentioned earlier, with the Game Boy player, being able to play, you know, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance, on your GameCube on your TV was just really cool to be able to do at the time.
Now, some people love it, some people hate it. What are your thoughts on the GameCube controller?
Um, well, for me personally, since I have big hands, it can get a little uncomfortable to hold for long periods of time, and the D-pad is probably the single worst thing that I can think of on the GameCube controller. Uh, not really so much for GameCube games, but for trying to play the Game Boy player on with the GameCube controllers. That D-pad way too small.
See, and I will take this is one of the things I'm hoping comes more out of What's Your Wednesday is I will take the exact opposite side of that. The GameCube controller is one of my favorite controllers of all time. I love the button layout. I love the D-pad. I love the C-stick. I love the rumble. I love the Wavebird. Now, I will agree for playing Game Boy games or Game Boy Advance games, having something like the Hori Pad definitely makes it more enjoyable. But I absolutely love the controller on the GameCube.
Yeah.
But then on the flip side, in that same generation, to this day, I still hate the Microsoft Duke controller. I will not buy a Microsoft system because I hate the controller so much.
Yeah, I mean, even for my big hands, that's almost too big for me. And I totally agree that the size and everything was really off-putting.
Well, and Krillin here makes a good point here in the chat, and that the Game Boy player and the broadband adapter was great for the GameCube. For many of us, this was the first time that we were able to play online with either I think there was a dial-up along with the broadband adapter for the GameCube, and now seeing those still in use going to conventions, and I mentioned them earlier, Eon Gaming when they do their Smash Brothers tournaments or their Mario Kart tournaments, it's neat to see that technology still in use.
Didn't the Super Nintendo have something kind of like that
In Japan, not in
in
the U.S.
Japan?
In Japan, they
Uh,
called it, I believe, and please, someone in the chat correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was called the Satellaview. And
okay.
basically, you could connect to their online service and be able to um, download. I think I'm now that I think about it, I'm almost positive it was for the Super Nintendo because there was like a Link to the Past style game and a couple other games that you could download and play through the Satellaview service.
Yeah, I've known about the Satellaview, but I thought I remembered seeing something that there was like a cartridge or something, just like a standalone cartridge that allowed for online connectivity.
Not that I can recall, but again, we'll throw it out to the chat. If anyone in the chat has information on that, feel free to let us know. So I'm going to stay in the same generation as you with my next All Star, and I'm going to talk about the highest selling console of all time. Of all time! I'm, of course, talking about the Sony PlayStation 2. And there was so many things that this console did that it redefined gaming in living rooms around the world. I mean, obviously, adding from the original PlayStation had CD support. This now had DVD support, brought more DVD players into the living room just because for just a slight increase over what a standard DVD player would cost you, you could now also play video games. It had, the DualShock 2 controller, which is phenomenal. One of the best controllers, again, ever made. Not as good as the GameCube, but still really, really good. Um,
I totally agree.
the lineup of games was just great. And much like the GameCube, there was both a dial-up and a broadband adapter. I remember hooking up, what was it? I think it may have been Dirt to Daytona or some racing game probably, playing online against people for the first time with the PlayStation 2. The mini version, not as big of a fan of that redesign. I understand why they did it. I've owned both. I now have just the original Fat in my collection. It was one of the first systems I can recall that had USB ports on it. Let's see. Fripp says there was a third-party online service with a cartridge for the Super NES. Don't remember the name. Maybe X or something X. Maybe. Okay. Well, thanks, Fripp.
Oh, X band,
Okay.
I think.
Okay.
Possibly. I'm not sure.
I
Not sure.
am I am not I'm not familiar with that. Hey, Marshmallow, we'll fill you in a little bit on your question. But I mean, I look at my and also the PlayStation 2 backwards compatible. So even though you may not have liked a launch title per se, if you were an existing PlayStation customer, you still had something to play at launch. Oh, and you had a DVD player.
Yeah, I remember. I remember when I picked up my PS2. I got it from Target, and they had a special going on to where you could get the system and like 2 free games. And I picked up the original Ratchet and Clank and Kingdom Hearts.
Ratchet and Clank was so good on that. I mean, that's when I got back into retro collecting. Those were games that I bought again was Ratchet and Clank because it's one of those games that it's honestly funny. It's really funny. Um,
Captain Quirk.
Captain Copernicus J. Quark, and I apologize for that. So, yep, we were talking about the PlayStation 2 and what a neat system that was. I see Keith is in the house. Um, you got you want to do your last couple rapid fire there?
Uh, Probably this one's going to be a composer in of course, the famous Nobu Uematsu
Okay.
of Final Fantasy fame. Just so many memorable soundtracks that he's made over the year, and with uh, Final Fantasy 14, just being able to hear, all of the classic in updated form is just uh, really really neat to listen to.
All right. Any others?
That's about it.
All right. I've got two that I'm going to hit real lightly and one I'm going to kind of wrap things up on. And again, this is our new format here for Wednesdays called What's Your Wednesday, where we're going to talk about, what your favorite um, items in a genre are: game, console, player, creator. So I'm going to talk about, first of all, the D-pad. The D-pad changed the way we played games. If you think about arcades in the 80s and everything, how it was the joystick and everything, the D-pad really changed things up there. I also got to give a shout out to clone consoles. I know a lot of us are fans of clones for one reason or another. I like the fact I can pull out a clone console now and hook it up via HDMI, and it just works. And you don't have to worry about old pins or dirty pins or bad power supplies or anything like that. Clone consoles definitely high on my list. But my number one all-star, honorable mention also, of course, Earthworm Jim. um, but my final all-star has to be the legendary, the amazing, the creative Shigeru Miyamoto. You think about how many different games and characters and legacies he has helped to build. Shigeru Miyamoto, along with Satoru Iwata and to a lesser extent Reggie Fils-amie, really helped develop Nintendo and bring it, first of all, from Nintendo or from Japan to the U.S., and then continue its growth from the 8-bit to the 16-bit to the 64-bit, and so on and so forth. And with that, of course, the character amongst characters, the mascot of Nintendo. It's Mario. Someone earlier mentioned Mario 64 and how it was the first real foray into a 3D world. And Fripp here just mentioned Mario 64, his masterpiece. You know what? Mario Odyssey, I think, is better than Mario 64. And that is not saying Mario 64 is bad. Mario Odyssey is simply brilliant. And Shigeru Miyamoto is, one of those creators that he gets gameplay, not just from what's on the screen, but how you interact with your characters on screen, how basically you immerse yourself in the world that he creates. And for that, that is why Shigeru Miyamoto and Mario are my two number one all-stars.
Shigeru Miyamoto has recently been quoted as saying, a rush game will forever be bad, but a game that is you know delayed will eventually be a good game.
I agree. And it's well, and it's you take a look at that approach versus George Lucas, where he always talks about his films are never finished; they're abandoned. Well, it kind of sets a really bad tone if you think about it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, he has had, and not just the Mario series. There's been so much else that Miyamoto's been involved with, and I just look at the way that he reacted last year at Ubisoft's presentation when they showed Fox coming to Starlink. I'm sorry, I had to look up what is that game. Oh yeah, Starlink. I have it. I still haven't opened it. Check out Russ Lyman's channel if you want to see some cool gameplay on it. By the way. But yeah, Shigeru Miyamoto, definitely a legend and often replicated, never duplicated, and just, he's awesome. So,
Definitely.
speaking of Austin, Justin, you have been awesome. I want to thank you for appearing here on the first ever episode of What's Your Wednesday. I do apologize for some of the technical glitches that we have. It's the joys of doing something live.
The joys of technology.
Exactly. I don't think you've got a channel or anything. I think you're just a fan, correct?
Yeah.
I was going to say if you had a channel or socials to promote, now as Steve the Homer True, the man who gave me my break in radio, said, now is the time to Don King yourself. If you've got if you've got things that you want to go ahead and promote, now is the time to go ahead and do it.
Nope, just stay a fan of the show.
Well, and I appreciate it, and I appreciate everyone who has continued to follow along, like, comment, share, subscribe, donate, do whatever you can to help the channel out. Justin, I think this has been fun, and for those who might be curious about wanting to do this again in the future, as we mentioned a couple times throughout the broadcast, email me, roxsolidmail@gmail.com. Our Patreon supporters do get first bite at the apple, like Justin here. Pretty laid-back experience, I'd say, Justin. I mean, anything that you would say to those if they'd want to do it and they might be a little nervous about it?
I mean, for me, I mean, I've never really done anything like this, but I actually had a really good time. So.
Well, and I hope everyone in the chat enjoyed this as well. This is something we are going to do every week, so if you want to go ahead and partake in a future episode, go ahead and email me at roxsolidmail@gmail.com. As always, you can follow us on the socials. Hit me up on Twitter at RoXolid Studios, on Facebook at facebook.com/RoXolid Productions, on, of course, YouTube here, youtube.com/RoXolid Productions, and on Instagram at instagram.com/RoXolid Productions GK. Make sure you do me a favor, hit that like button. I definitely appreciate that. Shows YouTube and the algorithm that, hey, this guy's doing something we actually really, really like and we want to see more of, and help spread the word there too. As always, if you do want to help support the channel, as I did mention, our Patreon supporters get first bite at the apple. If you want to be a part of this, head on over to patreon.com/RoXolid Productions. For just $1 a month, you can help support the future of the channel that we have here. Checking to see any final comments. Keith, thank you very much. I always enjoy your stream when you do, and I can catch them. Glad you could be here, Krillin. Definitely appreciate that. Let's see. Edgar brought up Gunpei Yokoi, the man behind the Game & Watch and the Game Boy, and I think he had something to do with the design of the Super Famicom, but I could be wrong on that.
And he also designed Wonder Swan
and the Virtual Boy.
and the Virtual Boy.
So, yep. Let's see. So definitely appreciate it, Justin. appreciate you. If you want to hang out for a couple minutes after the stream, we can kind of wrap things up here. But again, everyone in the stream, thank you so much. Spread the word. If you do like this format, go ahead and hit the like button. If you don't like this format, hit the like button. That way we know what you liked in the future here. And again, this stream has been brought to you by the amazing, the incomparable, the just all-around good guy that is Ryan at CastlemaniaGames.com. Make sure you check them out for all your modern and retro gaming needs. We've got the link down below in the more info section. And don't forget, if you use promo code RoXolid10, that is a new promo code here just for the streams, you can save 10% off of most items on the website. And then if you use the affiliate link down below, also helps out the channel. Also, we did have a new video go live today talking about the Yoke wireless controller for the PlayStation Classic. And we got a video coming out soon, too, about the, well, what I think is the rather disappointing Nintendo Switch Lite. I am Gary. He's been Justin. This has been What's Your Wednesday, talking about your favorite video game all-stars. We will see you next week, and until then, we are checked out, gone.